Welcome, everybody. I'm going to give 2 minutes for people who might be running a little late to get a chance to join us. So please just sit tight and we'll start at 2 minutes past the hour. Hello, everybody. For those of you who may have just joined us, I am going to give 1 more minute for people who might be running late a chance to join. So please just sit tight, and Ken and I will be with you in just 1 minute. All right, everybody, let's get started. So thanks for joining us today. Today, we're going to be talking about Control 3.6.3, test the organizational response capability. Before we get started, just want to cover a few housekeeping details. So today's webinar is scheduled to last 45 minutes to 1 hour. That includes a question and answer session. All participants will be muted to enable us to present without interruption today. A portion of today's event is dedicated to answering the pressing questions from the audience. Those questions were submitted when you signed up for the webinar. We gathered those, and those are the questions we'll be answering today. If we do have an outage during today's session, please just wait a minute and refresh the page. You can also always go back to that link you received via email and try and refresh that way as well. For your convenience, there is a link in the YouTube description to a glossary of commonly used terms, acronyms, and initializations that will be referenced during today's webinar. This webinar is being recorded. It'll be available on demand via the Exostar resource library. That can be reached at www.exostar.com/resources anytime after today's event. You can also always use the YouTube link you received to replay this webinar at any time. If you'd like to speak with one of our industry experts, if you want to get a copy of the slide deck, you can reach out to us at cmmc-team@exostar.com. You can also reach us on the Exostar website itself at www.exostar.com. There's a chat feature there on every page. We'd be more than happy to talk with you via that channel as well. So with that, let's go ahead and get started. So we're going to be talking today about NIST 800-171 controls. And as part of that, I'm going to give you an update of kind of where we are in the rulemaking process for CMMC, as well as just to make sure everyone's clear on what you need to do today to be in compliance with contracts you may have with the Department of Defense. Then Ken is going to take us through Control 2.6 via a tabletop exercise, and then we'll answer some questions as I mentioned that were submitted beforehand. So for those of you who don't know me, my name is Kevin Hancock. I'm Director of Sales Engineering here at Exostar. Been with Exostar now for about 3 years, but have been in the IT industry for obviously way more than that. I'm joined today by Ken. Ken joins us from Sikich. Ken, you want to take a moment to introduce yourself and Sikich?
Yeah, my name is Ken Squires. I'm the director of our cybersecurity department here. When really focused on governance risk and compliance, but the full gamut of security solutions, from pen testing to incident response planning to forensics. We're also an approved PCI forensics investigator firm, and pen testing and ethical hacking. All that comes underneath cybersecurity here, including ERP and modernization for technology, all under our technology kind of wing of the house.
Great, thanks, Ken. Thanks for joining me today. So first, as I mentioned, we're going to cover kind of where we are in the CMMC rulemaking process. So, we had big news in the CMMC community at the end of July. Excuse me. So the DoD submitted the CMMC rule to the Office of Management and Budget, in particular the OIRA office, in July of 2023. Now, what that now starts is a review from that office of the rule itself. They have up to 90 days, but it usually takes approximately 60 business days for that review to take place. After that, the rule itself will be published in the Federal Registry. The big thing to know about that, so around the October timeframe, that's after those 60 business days, keep an eye out for the notice of CMMC being placed in the Federal Registry, and it's going to get one of two designations. There's a chance, but that it becomes an interim final rule. If it becomes an interim final rule, it can take effect almost immediately. However, most in the community expect it to come out as a notice of proposed rulemaking. That means it goes out for a public comment period. Then the Department of Defense has to respond to those public comments, make any adjustments, etc. And that whole process takes about 280 business days. And that, 280 business days is more than a full year. So the thing to take notice of is that this is kind of that rulemaking process. So the fact that it's in this process means that CMMC is coming, but most likely you won't see it actually start to appear in DoD contracts until sometime at the end of 2024. And that's kind of but like I said, keep an eye out for in the October timeframe when the rule should get into the Federal Registry itself. So now with that said, there has been one update to DFARS clauses that you should take notice of, right? DFARS 252.204-7024 allows DoD contracting officers to consider the risk assessment of vendors as presented within that SPRS system as part of their evaluation of quotes or offers. So that means that that score you submit as part of your assessment of how you're doing against NIST 800-171 is accounted for as part of the overall risk of suppliers themselves, and now contract officers can consider that value as part of their overall bid process. So just keep that in mind. Now, just to remind everybody what you need to be doing today. So first of all, you should understand your contracts and understand what you've agreed to as part of those. If your current contracts, either as a direct provider of goods and services to the Department of Defense or as a subcontractor, has the DFARS clauses that you see there, that 7012, 7019, 7020, then you may, if you receive controlled unclassified information, need to adhere to the NIST 800-171 controls that tell you what you need to safeguard that information. If you've got those 7019 clause in your contracts, then you need to do a self-assessment of your organization and how on whether or not it has implemented those 110 NIST 800-171 controls. You need to score yourself. And to score yourself, you should be using the 171A. That's the assessment guide of how you're doing against NIST 800-171. As you walk through that, that'll provide you a numerical score, which you then take and enter into that supplier performance risk system, which the DoD then uses to evaluate suppliers to the Department of Defense. You may also be asked by various primes out there to provide that information to them as well, because if you've got subcontractors, you've got agreements in place to ensure that all of your subcontractors also adhere to these clauses, because these clauses flow down to your subcontractors as part of your agreements with the Department of Defense. So just make sure you know what you're contractually obligated to do today. So with that, I'm going to kick it over to Ken to start today's session and walk us through a tabletop exercise. So Ken, take it away.
All right, you should have my screen.
Yep, we see it now.
Perfect. All right, so really the cybersecurity team at Sikich has come up with the kind of a four-pillar cybersecurity program that we call the Cyber Playbook. And that's really executive services, risk management on top, with cyber offense, cyber defense as the main tactical services, and then modernization, like I was explaining, like we do before with the ERP and M365 dynamics and all that. But one of the big things for cyber defense when it comes to your game plan is a tabletop exercise. And it's almost every regulation has some kind of requirement for incident response and incident reporting, right? And so part of that is knowing what your capabilities are when it comes to testing your IR plan and your team, right? So an effective tabletop exercise will let you identify those gaps with your IR plan and your team and build more improvements on top of it, so that if you do get hit with ransomware or phishing campaign or phishing attack, that you'll be able to prepare to respond to that incident effectively and according to your contractual obligations or your regulatory obligations. So I'm going to go through that today. All right. So we know kind of the gamut and the history of threats that are out there. And really, it's kind of funny. We were going through kind of just a little history lesson internally on my team, and the story of debugging, not the facts. I got questioned that by our QA department. So we're an accounting firm, so everything goes through QA. So my QA lead said, no, that's not how debugging's starting, but there's an alleged story that's how debugging's starting, with a moth in a computer back in 1945, all the way to modern threats. And you can see kind of the full breadth of different attacks that have happened over the years, right? And we're really in this modern age where a lot of the attacks happen through a phishing attack or spear phishing, and then ransomware getting on devices. We have botnets where, especially with AI nowadays, with AI attacks, I don't know if you guys have seen kind of AI generated phishing campaigns that are out there. But this whole kind of botnet attacks, cloud-based, as we move from on-prem to the cloud, now we're opening up holes that we don't control and our service providers control. So we need to make sure that we're doing due diligence on our service providers, right? And then work from at home. Ever since COVID, and now we've moved our work base to the home. Now that just opens up a new gamut of threats, and the threats could be our kids playing on our computers, putting games on our computers, putting, Internet of Things. How do we control that at-home workforce, right, that we have nowadays, and the attacks that can come from the home environment? We have lots of clients that even like the president or C-suite, they have a home office that's attached through VPN into the organization, and that opens up a new, list of threats that could come in. And of course, we've seen in the news this nation-state attacks. So as you're building your tabletop simulation, you could go all the way back nowadays. The bug in the computer is not that far-fetched of like, a physical security attack or something happening, right? So you could, build a scenario even around that. I have a quick story. We had a client that was a printing firm, and one of the tabletop exercises that we had was they had a courier taking out HIPAA statements, all right, and the courier truck was hit by a train. This is a real life event, and as these HIPAA statements were spread across the landscape there, what kind of incident, what's our reporting requirements for that, and that was a physical security, had nothing to do with ransomware or phishing or anything like that. That was the scenario that happened, but then also because the way that they handled it, it wasn't properly, we put it through a simulation of how we should have handled it and what process improvements we should have done. So there was reporting requirements there, and we had to gather what we could for that incident, and then report how we what our requirements were for reporting to our partners, and whatever patient information was leaked during that breach that was scattered everywhere. It was a physical security breach type deal, right? So those are the unique scenarios you could create with a tabletop exercise, but really you want to pick from something that we know that's a modern threat. All right. I'll give a pro tip here, but there is a question that we've got to answer. What's some good references for creating an incident response plan? I would say, an incident response plan is probably one of the key documents you need for any compliance program, but just best practice in general, right? And if you don't have an incident response plan, you just don't know how to, properly report and manage an incident. We think from an IT managers that we're just going to, use our backups. We're just going to recover. We'll be fine. But there's a lot of individuals with our contractual obligations that we have to have, reporting requirements, that if those things aren't outlined in a plan, we could be liable. We could be in breach of contracts. We could have regulatory fines put on us if we're not reporting our incidents according to our obligations. So NIST has some really good documentation that's out there, 800.61 for incident handling guide, 800.86 for integrating forensics techniques into your incident response. There's a nice NIST IR 8374 that's ransomware management. That's a good reference. And then for testing, you can do 800.84 is a good reference too. If we were to stay in this kind of ecosystem of NIST, these would be the references that I would look for government contracts and that. One of the big things in the DFAR 7012 is reporting requirements. And there's a reporting requirements there for 72 hours for any CUI that's been breached. And really, when does the 72 hours kick in? That's if you go through your plan and you can imagine that anything that you see, a brute force attack or lost laptop or these things, those are all events until there's actually an incident. And incidents can be classified as a system breach and then data breach, right? So we have tons of events that are going on, a brute force attack. And if there's a phishing campaign and somebody sends you a phishing email, you click on the phishing email, you realize it's a phishing email, you close it out, you tell your security department, you clicked on it. That's an event. That's not an incident. You click on the phishing email, there's a form there, you see the form, you don't fill it out, you send it back to your security firm. That's an event. You fill out the form, you put your username and password in it, and you're like, oh, I'm changing my password. Technically, that's still an event. And as part of the event, we would say, go change your password. Okay. However, security is going to take that and they're going to look and they're saying, you know what? Somebody did use your username and password to breach our network. Now it's an incident. It's a system breach. Now we have an incident, but we don't know if there's a data breach yet, right? So our reporting requirements have not kicked in yet until we know that there's an actual data breach. Once we see that, yes, they connected to the system, but we changed our password, they were not able to get in, they didn't put anything in. Okay, we managed that incident. However, if we see there's a data breach, now we get into the kind of, after our investigation, they could have lasted like, a day or 2 days to do the investigation. Now we know there's a data breach of CUI and we have to report that within 72 hours. This is guidelines. This would be outlined in your plan. And I'm providing those guidelines so you kind of know the difference between an event and an incident. It's very important to have that defined in your information security program. What is an event and what's an incident? Because once it becomes an incident, that's when your reporting requirements kick in. Okay. Contractual obligations, you might have a contract with a Bank of America or a Discover card, and you look through your contracts or the DoD and it says, okay, we have 24 hours to report any incidents to our client data. Once you figure out that that's a data breach, you have 24 hours or else you're in breach of contract. Okay. So it's very important to read through your contracts and your regulatory requirements and know what your reporting requirements are. That helps set your appendixes or whatever you're going to put in your IR plan when there is that type of data, HIPAA, PCI, credit card, student data, whatever you're protecting, what are our reporting requirements for that type of data? And then lastly, we're going to get into, and this is what this whole topic is about, is testing those response capabilities. All right, and I thought this is a very practical topic. And one thing here at Sikich that we do a lot is tabletop exercises. It's part of our cyber defense service line. And you'll see us out there. You can look at it on our event page. We present these at special events throughout the year. You can come to one of our hosted tabletop exercises and go see one of those. So any questions right here, Kevin, on kind of setting up this requirement 3.6?
No, nothing, Ken. Sounds all great.
So we get down into it. And what I wanted to do today was kind of go through best practices on building a simulation. So one thing that we do, you want to do internally is once you grab your plan, is sending that plan out, and then let's build a real life scenario. It's very important to have a scenario that's it's specific to your organization, okay? And a pro tip here is that as a risk manager, enterprise risk manager, VCISO, what I do for our clients is I look at the enterprise risk register. And I don't just pick one risk off of there. I'll pick a combination of risk off of there. And I'll build a simulation off of what I know is the known risks to the organization and put together a scenario that not only can they plan for because they know it's a known risk to them, but also if there's something like, hey, I'm looking to get redundant firewalls, or I'm looking to get, move our database off of Microsoft Access to an actual SQL or Oracle database, right? And I can use, like, I'll give you an example. We have in the past, I had a client that would keep all their stock information in Microsoft Access, all right? There's no access control. There's no integrity check on there, right? And they're using this for their employee stock options, okay? That's a great scenario to say, what if somebody went in and messed something up? Or what if somebody attacked the Microsoft Access database? How would we handle that? That was an item that was in their risk register, and we used that as a scenario. So that way, upper management and the C-level was like, you know what, maybe we shouldn't be using Microsoft Access. The correct safeguard would be an Oracle database or something like that, that we should keep this, stock information in Salesforce or something, right? So utilizing your organization's enterprise risk register, if you have one, is a pro tip. And it makes the scenario relevant to your company. The other thing is to make sure you have relevant stakeholders. So this isn't an IT thing. This is anybody and everybody that's part of the IR team, but you should have operational risk staff, C-level staff in there, HR, public relations, your cybersecurity broker or firm that you're using for cybersecurity insurance, your external parties like Sikich. If you had a retainer with Sikich, you wouldn't want to involve us into that test. Anybody that you can get a hold, your external parties, your legal department, and here's another pro tip. Make sure you do due diligence on your legal department that they've handled cybersecurity incidents and breaches before. This could be a thing that you all of a sudden, engage your legal department and they have never handled a data breach or an incident, an insider threat case or anything like that. And now they're doing research in the middle of an incident. That's not what you want. You want to do the due diligence on your partners for this to make sure that they can handle an incident and they have that expertise. After you get everybody involved, you want to make sure that you have that you're capturing the outcome of the tabletop exercise. You're identifying any gaps with the plan or the people or the resources or the technology or the tools that you have. You want to identify anything where you have weaknesses, so that way you can build upon it and put the budget in to get those process improvements in place. And then regular updates. Most of the regulations say do an annual tabletop exercise. I think that's great, at least doing it annually. But as you know, the threat landscape changes on a daily basis, if not, so having something quarterly, I think would be a good approach, even if you're not doing a full one. It's almost like testing your backups, right? You want to test them on a regular basis, but maybe you do a full backup annually. Same thing with the IR plan. You might want to test pieces of it throughout the year. You might have a ransomware run book that you want to test out, but consistently maturing out the IR program is a must, especially nowadays. AI just coming into the the landscape here. I can guarantee that 99% of the IR plans out there have nothing to do with AI incidents, right? They have not been updated in the last 6 months to include a data breach where somebody uploaded a whole accounting database in the ChatGPT. Right now, you can upload documents into the code interpreter, and somebody did that, and then their account got compromised, and now they've disclosed that in ChatGPT. This is the type of threat that needs to be evolved and kind of put into and updated into your plan. And then document and record any of the findings or anything that you get out of that, and any process improvements. Have a plan of action, just like with your plan of action milestones for your CMMC gaps. Same type of deal. Start date, end dates, who's the owner of this. Build out a plan of action for any process improvements as well. Anything, Kevin, you want to add to this slide at all, or anything that you see that?
No, I don't think so, Ken. I think that covers it.
Okay, perfect. So let's get into what I wanted to do was kind of put you through a mock tabletop exercise and kind of go through how you would present one to your team, okay? And so in this scenario, you are Sikich. You are the incident response coach. And as presented by Sikich here, there's 3 key things that we want to do is when you present this, the tabletop simulation is make an introduction of yourself, introduction of the objectives of what we're trying to accomplish, go through and what's the objective of the whole tabletop exercise, and then the simulation, how to handle the simulation. So Sikich, we're an accounting technology advisory service firm here, full gamut of services. Like I said before, cybersecurity is what I'm the director of. What the incident response is built off is live scenarios. We want to present real challenges to your team, and you want to test your incident response capabilities. The important takeaways here is you want to expose the weaknesses. Be honest throughout this, right? This is not an audit. Okay, where are we weak? What do we need to improve? The hard thing, and I'll get into this here because I think it's the next one, is that you want to build an environment where the IT help desk can speak to the CFO in the same room, right? Because the CFO needs to know what the IT help desk is, and the IT help desk needs to educate the CFO on what the incidents are, right? So you need to build your IR team and build an environment in this simulation where you can speak honestly throughout the process, all right? And prepare and invest and educate, all right? You're going to have to invest in this. There's going to be gaps. Out of this tabletop exercise, you're going to let your audience know that, hey, we're going to identify gaps, and there might be investments in education out of this that we're going to need to put in place, okay? So our objectives, the objectives of the tabletop and incident response is to, by doing this tabletop exercise, what we're trying to do is limit the exposure of an incident. We're trying to limit the fallout from an incident, all right? If we have an incident, we have a proper incident response plan in place and program, we can limit that impact. And that's the important thing is we've had breaches with clients where it's a huge breach of customer information, but the cardholder data was not breached, right? So we were able to limit that environment, which reduced the liability and the cost of the breach, right? So now we're only having to send out password changes and maybe fraud protection to our customers, but we don't have all this regulations and fines that we have to pay to PCI Council for a data breach, right? Or the merchants for a data breach. So, limit the fallout of an incident. That's what we're trying to do. That's the outcome of this is, okay, let's go through what controls or safeguards can we put in place so we can limit that exposure and limit that impact. And then we want to build a tabletop exercise where we can help them show how we're going to contain the incident. Like I just said, we contained it down to the memory base. We didn't let it spread out to the cardholder data. And then be aware of compliance and regulatory concerns, all right? So you need to know your contractual obligations. You need to go through your contracts and know what your data breach reporting obligations are. You need to go through your regulations and know what those are. Because at any time there is an investigation, external investigation, and they find out you didn't meet the reporting requirements, then you can get sued and you're liable for that. And those were fines that come in, or breach of contract, or the board, it could lead to some hefty costs if you don't know what your compliance and regulatory concerns are. All right. Lastly, the simulation itself, all right? Make sure your team is aware that we're going to present some injects. We're going to present some scenarios. We want to foster good communication and collaboration throughout the process, right? This is a team building exercise. This is not an audit. This is not pointing fingers. This is a team building exercise, right? If you had a third party like Sikich or whoever the forensics coach is, or the IR coach, that external party, it's nice to have there, because then we can give the advice like I'm giving today, right? Like, this is what we see in this incident. After you go through, and we could coach and provide that mentorship to say, this is how we've seen other clients handle it. This is how we've seen other IT managers handle it. This is how the industry says you should handle it, those types of things. And then a recap of the things that you did good and the things that we could improve on, and just a recap of that scenario. So those are the things you want to get across to your team. And lastly, like I said, don't fight the scenario. Okay, there's lots of times you get into a tabletop exercise and, oh, we have Splunk in place for that. Oh, we have alert logic. Okay, well, this scenario is supposed to say, okay, yes, that's good to have that mitigating control in place. That's good to have that, but let's continue to go through the scenario. Let's not shut down the scenario as you go through the tabletop exercise, because that will happen a lot when you're trying to do these, especially with upper management. Is like, oh, we don't have contracts like that, or our data is not sensitive. It's like, okay, well, if we were to get a contract to have DoD data that had CMMC requirements, how would we handle that then, right? So it's good as you're being the coach and the mentor to be able to pivot through these situations and go through, but let the audience know, don't fight the scenario. Let's play through the scenario, because as we get through it, there might be other things that, actually we are weak at, all right? And we may not have all the details right now. That's why you have like the reoccurring tabletop exercise, okay? We do this once a year or every other quarter, because we build up, okay, last time we didn't have the IR plan defined, which is a funny thing. I will say the majority of our tabletop exercises, our clients don't have an IR plan yet, right? Because in their minds, we can do it. We have a practice in place. We can do it. We just don't have it defined yet. And so now the second one, we have the plan, because that came out of the first one. And now we have more details, right? So you don't have to have a plan to necessarily do a simulation. We're not waiting on the documentation to go through this process. Anything, Kevin, here before I move on?
So I guess two things, Ken. I like your focus on the real world example, right? People are going to take it more seriously if it's something that could happen and respond to. But then your point about don't fighting the scenario, right? It is human nature sometimes to justify, right? Oh, well, we do it this way, we do it that way, or that would never happen to us because of X. But as you said, right, this is a learning experience. This is a team building exercise. This isn't an audit, right? It's just internal, right? The only people that, if we don't do this right, that are going to get hurt are ourselves.
Correct. Yeah, that's the hard thing to get out there, because nobody wants
right.
to look like that in the room.
Right.
Weak at something, but this is that team building exercise. And yes, we do have positive things in place, but let's not fight that. Let's keep on going and identify the weaknesses.
And then to your other point about that, when you've gone to a number of companies and do this, and they don't really have an IR plan, right? And I think that is a lot of people, right? They're always like, well, if it happens, I'll address it then, right? I know I've got to call somebody, or I know I've got to do something, but but can you use something like this to help document, to start that documentation process?
100%. And that's the plan of actions that come out of this, right? It's like, okay, we need to define our reporting requirements for, like the example I use, Bank of America or the DOD. Like, okay, we have that. We need to make sure that we don't have that defined and documented. Let's get that documented. We have these other contracts. We don't have a full IR team. We don't have a PR team. Okay, now we know we need to define that and what that is. Yeah. And so the plan of action, if you just go through one of these, can help you start building your outline for an IR plan.
Great.
Perfect. So I'll kind of skip through here, but just talk about how we handle it is you kind of present the scenario, and then the scenarios are to provoke that thought and that discussion, right? And get that interaction out of your group. And that's what I was talking about, the collaboration. Make sure you get that freedom of speech kind of out there. Let them talk, let them discuss. Don't break them off from their discussion. I'll tell you, we schedule these for like 2 hours, and we end up not getting through the rest of if you don't get through the simulation, it's okay. Because there's so much good information that you're going to be gathering that you'll have enough to kind of build and make your improvements off of. And when we get this team together, this team is not usually together very often. And so they don't get to talk about these things. So it does drive that discussion. Oh, I didn't think about our CAD system. Oh, I didn't think about how this was connected to that and if this went down. Oh, I didn't know we had that client or that contract obligation, right? So contractual obligation. So let the discussions happen when you're given these simulations, okay? And you're going through this process. All right, so here's the team. From a baseline kind of IR team, outside counsel, executives, you can break this up a little bit between IT and executives. Sometimes when we do tabletop exercises, a good approach is to kind of meet with the IT management staff and IT staff in the morning, go through the scenario, and then kind of like present it to the C-level in the afternoon and say, here's what came out of this incident. Now, how would you handle reporting it? Okay. So you can kind of break this up, but it's also good to have them all in the same room. So depending on the size of your team and how the dynamics and culture is in your organization, you can this is a kind of a pro tip. You could take the technology personnel, run through the scenario with them, and then take the output and run it through with the C-suite personnel and how they would report and handle that and present that to their partners and any of the stuff that they have. And then kind of go back and forth that way and handle kind of a 2-day approach to it or how you want to schedule it out. But I will say that's a good way to do it as well. Or if you can have everybody in the same room, that's the best form of discussion right there. But you want to make sure executives are part of it. This isn't an IT thing, because once it becomes a data breach, it's a data owner thing. Okay. And IT is there to do the testing, or security is just there to identify what was breached. After that, it's handed off to procurement or C-level or the data owner to know how to handle the partner to tell them that it was breached, right? So this can't be just an IT and security thing. This is a company wide, not company wide, not like a town hall meeting, but multiple departments, and those C-levels should be part of it, right? If you can, make sure you have any details or anything about your cyber insurance and what the brokering, what the policy is, and how do we engage them, and do they have a forensics firm that they work with? Sikich works with multiple insurance providers as their preferred forensics investigators, right? So make sure you have retainers set up with forensic partners, those types of things. This is to build this kind of team here. Make sure you know your law enforcement contacts, and you might have somebody from law enforcement there. You might know somebody that can help or engage with InfraGard or FBI, right, with those departments. Managed IT, your service provider, like if you're using Sikich for managed services or another service provider, make sure that they're part of that meeting. Public relationships, you want to have PR for internal messaging and external messaging to control the narrative of the incident, right? And then your incident response team. Anybody see missing here? Any suggestions, Kevin, that you think they would be part of this team, or just looks like a pretty good?
I mean, I think it's a pretty good representative team. As you said, it includes, the folks I would think about, to your one point about if there's a data breach, you have to let the customers know. So you may want to involve somebody like sales or something like that, depending on, kind of who owns that relationship. But yeah, that's my only thought around it.
Yeah, exactly. Once it gets to a certain level of the incident, that's who you want to engage those personnel into the process, right? And
Yeah.
so you need to make sure in your plan or that you have that you bring those personnel in. But in the scenario and the solution in the simulation, you can have them all there because that way they can hear what other people are doing and they're educated on what's going on behind. But when you actually have an incident, you may not want to engage certain departments until
Right.
you actually figure out the data, right? So that's
Yeah.
good. All right. So let's go through one here. So let's begin. All right, it's 8 a.m. Oh, it's always Monday morning, right? At 8 o'clock, we get in. Something has happened. Help desk alert comes in. All right, help desk calls, encrypted files. Oh, everybody's nightmare right now, right? Applications offline. Employees are calling the help desk, saying they can't access Bentley and Autodesk applications. Some also report receiving your files have been encrypted. Notice when trying to access documents and files. All right, so Autodesk is now one of your main applications is encrypted. And they were starting to see the help desk reports that basically, as we look through, we could kind of see that here's a message that's in there. Your files have been encrypted. Dear victim, files have been encrypted and your computer has been limited. To unlock your files, you must pay with one payment method provided. You regularly check your activity on your screen and you can see if you have paid, right? So here they go. They want us to pay. They want us to give some kind of Bitcoin. They have a reference in an email out there that they're trying to get us to pay this ransomware. All right. Everybody's nightmare. It's on your AutoCAD system. You've been writing up, CAD drawings for whatever product you're making to fulfill your DoD contracts. And now it's been hit with ransomware. All right. These are the types of questions you would want to ask, how was it initially contained? What were the things that you would do as soon as this alert came? What are the first steps that you would take for containment on this, right? Do you disconnect the system off the network? All right. Do you, look at the firewall logs? Do you start pulling up user access and looking at those logs? What are the first things that you're going to do to contain this? And a lot of times you don't want to pull the system off the network right off the bat because you need to monitor and capture IP addresses and the activity that's going on in the data flow. So there's a step there that you need to discuss. How do we handle this initial request from the help desk, right? Files have been encrypted. We know there's been access to this. There's been an impact. What type of impact? What type of data in it? And what's going to impact these actions that we're taking? These are the type of questions that you would ask to go through here. And what needs to be answered at this time? Okay, what type of data is it? Whose account was it? Who are the users that are impacted? Who are the assets what are the assets that are impacted? Where are the assets? These are all the who, what, when, where, whys that we need to go through and that we should be asking ourselves as a team as we see this inject here. You're capturing those in a report, all right? So as we kind of go through, you set up the next scenario. We've done all that. We've done the initial containment of it. We've gotten the alert from IT. We've done our investigation. We see what's been reporting by what files are encrypted. So this is what we get back from IT after the initial review. It looks like for the AutoCAD application, the application has stopped. The application database files are encrypted. All right, all of our data outside of the C windows and program files on each domain controller is encrypted. So attempts to the RDP into the domain controller fail with corrupt missing profiles, and event logs show unusual administrative logins from our engineering employees' PCs. So somewhere on our engineering's PC, something has, generated either a ransomware attack or that we can kind of identify it's our engineers. Okay. It's always our engineers or developers. They're always doing something they're not supposed to be doing on their PCs. And they request privilege access because they need it on their machines. And then that privilege access gets compromised. And now we don't have them segmented. And now our AutoCAD program has been, encrypted and offline. And that's where we do all of our product design. our Autodesk application. Right. So we go through, gather what your team's saying now. What are they saying about the domain controller and RDP, and how are they handling those situations? How are they going through? And what are the questions that need to be asked now? And right now you see my screen, right? There's not a white box in front.
Nope,
Kevin?
nope, we see the inject recap.
Okay. My Outlook decided to put a notification right in front of my box here. So. All right. What questions need to be answered again? What systems are being relied on, right? Relied upon, right? What information needs to be collected? How will this information be collected? You know, is it log information? Is it access information? How are we going to collect this? Where are we going to put it at? What changes or actions are being taken to contain the incident and recover from it? Do we have backups for Autodesk? Do we have, backups of the files that were encrypted? Can we recover from those backups? When was the last time we did backups? What data are we going to lose between the 8 hours we did the backup for the day and last? Like, what was been worked on? These are all the different impacts that we need to know, and what users are impacted by this. We need to kind of, through this scenario, you're going to be thinking about, do I have backups? Do I have recovery? Oh, we have to pay with Bitcoin. Do we have a cyber insurance partner that can help us pay with Bitcoin? Are we even going to pay with Bitcoin? You know, Sikich would say, we don't pay the terrorists, right? So, that's just one thing that we stick to. So, but that each company is different. Some companies will say, we'll pay the Bitcoin and we want our backups. And we're good. All right. So that's up to you to define that and know that and discuss that during these conversations. Like, what are we going to do with this message that came in, and how are we going to do it? And let's keep track. Let's write that down and add that to the plan as we go forward. All right, so the attacker contacts. Oh man, it's new now. They're not getting their money. They're a little bit upset. It's been 4 hours now. Where's my Bitcoin? Okay, we're on your systems. All right, we've locked your data. Send 25 Bitcoin to the wallet. And here's the wallet. So the interesting thing here about this wallet thing, if you've identified the FBI or anybody like that, they might have seen this wallet key somewhere else. And they could trace it back to other incidents that have happened. And may even know who has that or another incident they're working with. So this is unique, but as you go through these kind of ransomware, there's information that are sent that you may be able to trace back to, whoever the attacker is. And so gathering this and presenting this to the right people could be a method to finding out, who's trying to exfiltrate our data or hold us ransom for this 25 Bitcoin. So keep these types of elements in, as part of the reporting, and make sure that you capture these as you go through your incident response, and let the team know, hey, if you see anything out of the ordinary like this, take a screenshot, capture it, do what you can, right? So the other thing that's big about this, and like the attacker said, as they're monitoring, they could be on your system seeing what you're doing. So the one thing, as you go through your simulation, is say, how are we going to talk about this scenario, this incident, right? Are we going to handle it through paper or through text messaging? You want to know in your department or in your company, how do you handle outside speaking about the incident that's going on internally on-prem on your systems, right? Or wherever it's at, right? So there might be a different channel that you use for communications. Bring that up, discuss that during the simulation. How are we going to handle communications during the simulation? Because it seems like they're on our systems in the simulation, right? All right, so now that you've actually heard from the attackers, what changes now? All right, like I was saying about the event, the system breach, and then the data breach, every one of those levels, something changes within your incident response approach, all right? So now you know this is an active incident, okay? And now that kind of changes your approach now. Now it's like, okay, we know they're on our systems. Now now that we've captured the logs and everything, now let's disconnect the system off the network, because now we have the right amount of information we need. They reached out to us. What's your approach now? What changes now that the attacker has reached out to you? Throwing these kind of injects into the kind of changes up the approach. One scenario that I was doing with what I'll give away here with our AI simulation thing, the scenario was leading up. It was pretty cool because I picked insider threat and ransomware. And the whole scenario was leading up to an insider threat, that the insider was giving away ITAR information. And come to find out, it was actually blackmail through a phishing campaign. They were getting blackmailed to send it. So it wasn't like they needed it for financial gain. They were getting blackmailed by an attacker that was doing it. And that's why they were sending out. So it shifted my IR response then. I was focused on this individual and why would they leak this data, to now I'm focused on protecting the individual because their life was threatened if they didn't send this information. So inject those things into your simulation. How do they change up the randomness of the event? I think that's very important. And that really, through this AI simulation, kind of threw me off. Okay, now I was going to be on this person, you know, and I interviewed them, and then they told me, no, I'm getting blackmailed for this. So that's when I had to include the FBI and the, you know, the police department, and that, because now we needed witness protection almost for this person that was having to send out ITAR data. Pretty cool. When you guys get to the IR simulation, I'll send you guys, those are the types of things that it creates. But inject things into your tabletop exercise that changes it up and randomizes the simulation. Okay, throws a little wrench into it. All right, and that's it. So to be continued on what's happening here, right? So you can imagine we're just getting into it now. We just got contacted. Now it's when the actual scenario gets good and you kind of go through and how you got to work it out and how do you communicate and who do you engage and all that. But this is a setup for how you would interact with your team, okay? The types of things that you would throw in there to throw them kind of off to make sure that we have that covered. Real world, keep it real world. Don't, you know, there's a James Bond element to this, but, you know, kind of keep that real world and inject those things where it seems fit and kind of gather what's, you know, needed for safeguards at the end of what the process improvements are, which is what we'll get into next real quick here. And I know we're reaching on the 10-minute mark here. Debrief. After you've done it, make sure you give yourself enough time or schedule another meeting to debrief the outcome, okay? What happened, what went well, what's additional suggestions, what's some technical gaps that were identified, what's some process gaps. Do that debriefing. Do it by each scenario that you had. So this is inject 1. Okay, when the help desk, what was some of the good things that went well there? What was additional suggestions, right? Inject 2, okay, now we know this with our RDP and the employees, the engineering employees, PC. What are some things that went well? What are some additional suggestions? What are technical gaps there that we identified? The note, how did we handle the note? How did we pay ransomware? Did we, you know, through the simulation, was that the right choice to do? We found out we ended up contacting our cybersecurity insurance provider. They say, no, we don't have coverage for that. You know, what are the things? Because a lot of times your cyber insurance will not pay for ransomware. So these are things that you gotta know and you gotta work out, and you'll find throughout this project. All right, my last slide here before we get to the next one here is the pro tips. You know, what comes out of this? What's the takeaways? You know, Sikich does tabletop exercises almost weekly now, it seems. We're doing a lot of them. I think tabletop exercises are even better than risk assessments, honestly. It tests out your program. It tests out your response. It identifies weaknesses like a risk assessment. It's a great approach where, you know how if you're an IT manager and you're always like, I need to do a risk assessment, I need to do a risk assessment. Let's do a tabletop incident response test, because that's doing a risk assessment while you're also fulfilling the tabletop testing requirement. So we're really focused on making sure that these are real events, things that can occur, things that are specific to the company. Include external factors, so or facilitators. This is what we're saying with like a Sikich or somebody like that could come out and, you know, kind of help facilitate give that breadth of knowledge that we see at Sikich here with multiple clients. And this is how we see this person. This is how we see this contract written. These are the things you need to be aware of because you have credit card data or health information. These are the industries that require these things. So it is good to have a third party there that's a specialist in forensics to be part of that training. Rotate the roles. Have somebody else fulfill different roles, right? How they would handle it. You never know. People wear multiple hats in that. Put a time clock on it. If you have one of those rapid fire things, we need to handle this between now 8 and 12, or else boom, everything's shut down, right? Provide a feedback loop. Make sure you got the feedback from it. How did it go? What do we need to go? Make sure you include non-technical people, right? HR, like I said, you know, whoever, it's not a technology thing. It's the company as a whole, make the data owners, the procurement, the sales team, the help desk, non-technical folks as well, the call center. Document everything. Any minor observations, like I said, anything is important and could be an improvement process. And don't let your tests be a one-time thing. Regular update and test. Anything, Kevin, there at all? Throw out any best pro tips or anything you've seen?
No, I think we've covered it all.
All right, perfect. So as part of this, I've been actually personally working on this. And it's a prompt in ChatGPT. It's kind of fun. You go out, have some instructions here. Basically, go to this URL, copy and paste this into ChatGPT 4. If you are a ChatGPT 4, it works better. ChatGPT 4 is just more advanced. It works in 3.52 as well, but 4.0 is what this really works with. And it's very interesting. Choose your own adventure, incident response kind of game, kind of D&D kind of walkthrough text-based game, but highly, education out of it. It's a good education tool. Put you through some scenarios you wouldn't think about. It's a good narrator, and kind of really, this is our Sikich AI tabletop simulator prompt. Really, we don't have an application for this, but a nice little prompt for you guys to play with. Go out to this website. If there's any tabletop simulation, forensics, pen testing, CMMC readiness, our firm, ERP, we're heavily right now working with logistics companies that are having to meet pickup and shifts for their ERP to meet CMMC requirements. This is a big focus on us right now with logistics companies that are out there. So anything, any of you guys' needs for those, we are here from you, from an incident response and compliance managers.
Great. Well, thanks so much, Ken. So as Ken put up this slide, I'm going to take over sharing again. And this will remind you that we do have an exit poll. We'd love you to take part in that. It lets us know how we did today, as well as lets us know how additional topics you'd like to hear, gives us feedback, etc. So Ken and Sikich are one of the partners that we have that offers those basic assessment and readiness assessment services, as Ken mentioned. This is also part of Exostar's CMMC Ready suite, kind of wherever you are in that NIST 800-171 compliance or CMMC compliance journey. Exostar has some products and solutions that can help you. We have our certification assistant that can walk you through that NIST 800-171 assessment, Policy Pro that can help you build those policies that you need as part of your overall plan. And then if you're looking for a place to store and process controlled unclassified information in secure enclave, please reach out to us and learn about our managed Microsoft 365 for CMMC. We did get some questions in, so I'm going to ask these. So Ken, you provided some great information about guides, documentation. Anything you want to add to number one here?
No, I would say even going through that simulation really helps kind of help with that documentation and using some of the AI tools that are out there in conjunction with the NIST tools.
Great. Number two, I think, is key here, though. So what type of records do you keep once you've completed the exercise for when you are doing that assessment or having that auditor come in and see how you're doing over your overall cybersecurity compliance journey?
Yeah, let's just correlate this back with CMMC, plan of action and milestones, right? So what comes out of it, what risk even that you might want to add to your risk register, what gaps do you have with CMMC, keeping that plan of action milestones. And I always suggest in a compliance program to create a change control ticket that you did that action.
Right. Yeah.
And then attach it to it. So that way you can go back to your ticket and say, yeah, we did a tabletop exercise in November. Here's the output of it. And here's who was there. And it's all in a compliance tool or change ticket.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. So we got some general questions on CMMC. So number 3 here, is it possible to get CMMC 2.0 assessed early? Or do we actually have to wait till it comes into effect and then engage with the C through PA up?
There is a voluntary program at this moment. And yes, we would always suggest not to wait. You wait, And then what's going to end up happening, the floodgates are going to come in, and a company like Sikich is going to be doing readiness programs and not be able to get to you, right? So let's
Yeah.
build it. Let's be active. Let's get on it now. And you can volunteer. And it looks good from a due diligence with, with the primes that are out there,
Yeah.
that you've done, and you've gone through that process, and you might win a contract just because of that.
Absolutely. So we've reached our time limit. So just want to provide folks, there are some additional useful sources of information out there, but I just want to thank everybody for your time and attendance today. Hope you enjoyed the presentation. Just a reminder, if you do get a chance, fill out that exit poll. And Ken, thanks so much for joining me today on today's session. Hope you have a great day as well. And everyone, I hope you enjoy the rest of your week.
Thank you. It was a pleasure. Thank you, everyone. Have a good one.
Take care.